here on Talk Radio.
Badass XL on Talk Radio.
Now, despite the national lockdown, there has been a spike in stalking cases. Why is this, and what can we do to resolve it? Joining me now to talk about it is Suky Bhaker, CEO of the Suzy Lamplugh Trust. Hi, Suky.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Oh, no, thank you. So, new data has shown that in the past year, 100% of stalking cases have reported a cyber stalking element. What does that mean?
That's right. We have seen a huge spike, not just in stalking cases, but in cyber stalking cases. So these are cases where the individual is being monitored, tracked, harassed online. So this could be through email, through their social media accounts, or where spyware has been used to monitor, to watch, or to track the victim to carry out that sort of fixated and obsessive behaviour. What I would say, though, is stalking is very much a crime of fixation and obsession. It's about persistent unwanted behaviour. And of those cases, the majority of those are still seeing an offline element of stalking as well, despite the lockdown. So we're seeing behaviours such as loitering and following still being carried out. Perpetrators have very much weaponised the pandemic. They're using things like their daily exercise as an excuse to contact the victim. And that's incredibly terrifying for the victim, because victims are essentially telling us that they're feeling like sitting ducks at the moment in lockdown.
Is this a crime that mainly affects women, or men and women equally?
This is a gender-based crime, so it's 80% of callers to our helpline, the National Stalking Helpline, are women. Women are disproportionately affected by this crime. So approximately 1 in 5 women and 1 in 10 men will experience this crime over their lifetime. And
what happens when they report it? Do the police take action, or does something actually, I don't want to say serious, but does something physically violent have to happen before police can step in?
Absolutely not. The legislation which we helped to campaign to bring in 2012 very much looked at the psychological factors that are intertwined within stalking, and that doesn't need to include physical contact behaviours. Unfortunately, we do see physically abusive behaviour taking place in stalking cases, including things like sexual violence taking place. But you don't need to have physical contact behaviours taking place for the police to take action.
And we know that there's, an in-person element, but how has the internet helped stalkers? I don't know if helped is the right word, but how has it enabled stalkers?
Well, there is obviously a much greater ease and accessibility to victims online. We know that perpetrators tend to go where their victims are. So if that might be in their workplace, that might be where they are out and about socialising. And what's happened during the pandemic is we're obviously all doing those things a lot more online. And so it makes sense that this is where we're seeing those behaviours increasing in those same spaces. And
do people who are being stalked generally know their stalker?
It's a combination. So 50% of individuals who are being stalked are actually being stalked by an ex-intimate partner. So they may also be experiencing or have had experienced domestic abuse. A small volume of individuals who are being stalked by strangers, so somebody who they won't have known. But the majority of individuals are being stalked by someone they know. It might be an acquaintance. Even in those stranger stalking cases, it may just be the fact that the individual doesn't know who the stalker is at that point that the behaviours have begun, but there has in fact been a connection between them and the stalker at some point in their history.
What do you think fuels that kind of obsessive behaviour? What is it in somebody's brain that makes them feel this is the way to somebody's, accessibility to somebody?
Well, it's an interesting question because actually stalking is motivated by different things for different sort of typologies. So some individuals are motivated by revenge. Some are motivated by a desire for a relationship. But in fact, what we see very often is that this is actually about a power and a control over the victim. For a small minority of stalkers, they may not see their behaviour as inappropriate. So they may not actually think that unwanted contact is inappropriate. But unfortunately, for a large volume of them, it's about a power and control.
And one of the things that was really interesting in your research was you say that since March last year, so in the last year, the people who are calling the stalking helpline and reporting these incidents are suffering a much higher level of distress. Is that because we're all in a higher level of stress right now anyway, or actually is it the fact that people have more time on their hands, so more time to dedicate to stalking? What's causing that?
Well, we know that for stalking victims anyway, the trauma that they experience is immense. If you think about the sort of omnipresence that a stalker can create around the victim, infiltrating every facet of their life, victims tell us that they experience things like hypersensitivity, hypervigilance, anxiety, depression. What the pandemic has done is very much magnified all of those things, because our sense of isolation has been magnified during lockdown. And you're right, our survey's actually shown that 91% of victims who have been stalked are experiencing mental health problems. And in fact, 78% of them are experiencing symptoms that are consistent with PTSD. Wow. But very often that isn't being picked up.
I know that it shouldn't be this way around. It should be that, the question is, what can we do to stop stalking for good? But in the meantime, while we deal with that, what can people do to keep themselves safe, and particularly keep themselves safe online?
There's a number of things that individuals can do. I mean, in terms of online safety, there's some really basic things, such as looking at your security settings and your privacy settings, ensuring you've got robust passwords in place. But more generally, what we would advise someone is that if you think you're being stalked, try not to, if you can, respond to your stalker. Stalking is very much about a pattern of behaviour. So sometimes those individual isolated incidents might look low level, so that email or that call or that person standing outside your home. But it's the context of all of those behaviours together that really builds that pattern. And that's why it's really important, particularly in terms of a prosecution, if you can, to keep a diary of everything that's happening and any evidence that you might have, including the impact that it's having on you, so we can see the totality of that context, and really trust your instinct. If you feel something is wrong, tell someone, because stalking is a crime, and you have the right to report that to the police and for it to be investigated. And then what I'd say is that there are also specialist services like ours, the National Stalking Helpline, available to individuals to get help. We not only offer advice through the helpline, but we have a specialised advocacy service as well for individuals who might want more in-depth support. And you may also be eligible for a specialist trauma support as well through our service. And what I'd also say, I know there's some individuals out there who might not be ready to make a call or might not be able to make a call during lockdown. You might not be able to physically make a call. We have an online tool that's available for victims to be able to access, to see if they think they're being stalked, they can identify that, and they can download information and support through that tool as well.
Okay. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, Suzy. And the work that the Suzy Lamplugh Trust do is absolutely incredible. So you can find them online at live_life_safe. That's Suky Bhaker, their CEO of the Suzy Lamplugh Trust, talking about why the instances of stalking, and particularly cyber stalking, have gone up so dramatically during lockdown. As she said, just simply the fact that those victims have now become sitting ducks, that somebody knows where they are at all times, that somebody is capable of weaponising the hour a day they have to go and exercise against them, and who can keep them trapped in their own houses. They don't even need a government mandate to do that. It's happening to them because they are victims of stalking. Next, we are talking about the change in organisations and businesses and their gender equality. Have we finally